Hey guys, welcome back. We've almost reached the end of the course. By now, you certainly know a lot of concepts in Hadoop. Now you're ready to get your dream career in Hadoop. This lesson will give you some tips on how to approach and prepare for Hadoop interviews. To get your dream job in Hadoop, first let's talk about where you can find Hadoop job openings. The easiest thing you can do is to update your LinkedIn profile and add Hadoop to your skill set. You can even list individual tools like Apache Pig, Hive, etc. Vendors and recruitment firms are constantly on LinkedIn trying to find qualified candidates. Updating LinkedIn will bring the job openings to you instead of you running after the job openings. So, this is an easy and very important step. Next, check out the job portal that is widely popular in your area. For example, in the United States, Indeed.com is very popular lately, and just a simple search for Hadoop will list a lot of Hadoop job openings. A less known source for job openings is careers.stackoverflow.com. Just like any job portal, put in the keyword you're looking to search and you will see the job openings. Check out Hadoop meetups in your area in meetup.com. Simply go to meetup.com, provide your location, and search for Hadoop keyword. And you will see all the Hadoop meetups in the area. There are Hadoop meetups in all major cities, and they are quite powerful. You can listen to Hadoop experts talk about interesting topics in the meetup, and also hiring managers often looking for qualified candidates in the meetups because it provides a one-on-one interaction before they even look at the candidate's resume. And you never know, you could meet your next boss in one of those meetups. Hadoop job openings come in wide variety of flavors since Hadoop framework is very vast. For example, you may see an opening for a MapReduce programmer in Java or might find an opening for a Pig developer to write Pig scripts for nightly jobs, or you might find an opening to join a Hadoop testing team. So look carefully at the job requirements and apply accordingly. Also, look for the number of years with Hadoop experience that is expected for the job in the job profile. You will often see job requirements mentioning that Hadoop or big data experience is preferred or desired. These job openings are perfect for candidates who are yet to start their career in Hadoop. If you already have some experience in Hadoop, then apply to jobs that require the same number of years of Hadoop experience that match with your experience. Next comes the most important part in your Hadoop job hunt or for any job search for that matter, your resume. Lot of tips that I'm going to mention here would apply for someone who does not have an experience in Hadoop. However, some tips that I'm going to mention here assume that you have some entry-level work experience with Hadoop. If you are yet to start your career in Hadoop, make sure to mention all the concepts that you learned from this course. Doing so will definitely showcase your knowledge in Hadoop. You can even quote this course in your resume. Don't forget to list and elaborate all the projects and its details that we looked in this course. This will give an idea to the hiring manager the extent of your understanding in Hadoop. Apply all the tips that will go over here in your resume as well. There are certain things that any Hadoop hiring manager will look for in a resume. And here are some of the key elements that you must mention in your Hadoop resume. Anyone who's looking at your resume would want to know how and why you're using Hadoop in your project. Describe the project in detail and explain how Hadoop helps you solve your use case or problem at hand in detail. Hiring managers usually look for this as this would give them an understanding of your project and appreciate the complexity of the problem you're trying to solve with Hadoop. A Hadoop environment is something in which hundreds of nodes work together in harmony. It's like a well-organized orchestra if you think about it. It is very important to give more details about your cluster like number of nodes, data volume, distribution used, tools used and their versions, node configuration, any special configurations like high availability for instance, details about cloud services that you used like AWS, Amazon, Azure, etc. Next, mention the Hadoop distributions you worked for. For example, Cloudera CDH 5.4. Don't worry if the job requirement is asking for a different distribution than to the one that you worked or are familiar with. Distribution does not usually play a major role in shortlisting a resume. Make sure to list the biggest Hadoop cluster that you worked with. Hiring managers usually look for this because a larger cluster means most likely more challenges you usually experienced in your day-to-day job. So definitely list the number of nodes of your biggest cluster in your resume. Describe your roles and responsibilities in detail. List all the things you do on a day to day basis in your resume to improve your chances of getting picked by a recruiter or by a hiring manager. For example, if you worked on performance improvements, troubleshooting, cluster installation, make sure to mention all those. Don't just say you're a Hadoop developer and leave it at that. The point is, don't be shy and too modest. Many times we see resumes from referrals which are lousy and boring. But when we speak to the candidates, we can see their full potential and what they know about Hadoop and what they accomplish day to day. Their resume clearly don't do justice to what they do day to day in Hadoop and what they know. If the candidates did not come through referrals, there is no way we would have given them a call for an interview because of the lack of information in their resume. List all the tools and libraries that you worked or familiar with. For example, Pig, Hive, etc. Don't just stop there. Also list all the specific libraries like Dataflow or Elephant Bird that you're familiar with. We are not suggesting that you add every tool out there in and around the Hadoop ecosystem to make your resume a powerhouse. Keep in mind, you'll be asked questions from what you have listed on your resume, but certainly include all the tools that you work with. Real-world Hadoop use cases involves file formats that are not just text, so definitely list all the file formats that you're familiar with as well. Make sure to highlight specific elements in your resume that match with the job requirements. This way, the resume is tailored to the specific job that you're applying for. Now you have a good resume. Let's say you're called in for an interview. What are the questions you can expect in an interview? 3 years ago, only a handful of companies were using Hadoop. Now, Hadoop technology has grown leaps and bounds, so has its user base. Companies from almost all domains have started investing in big data technologies. Because of this, we see a steep increase in the number of openings in the big data or Hadoop space. With this increase in demand for Hadoop professionals, we also see Hadoop interviews maturing a lot. We see a lot of complex, scenario based analytical questions asked in Hadoop interviews. It has become absolutely necessary for a beginner or an experienced Hadoop professional to be technically prepared before they show up to an interview. Each interview is different, and the interview process and questions asked in the interview varies from company to company and from interviewer to interviewer. Some interviewers would like to focus only on the topics that the job requires, whereas some interviewers would like to test the candidates on a wide variety of topics. Hadoop interviews are very different from other technical interviews. If you're interviewing for a Java developer position, for instance, you'll come across a lot of technical questions in Java and very little about the use case of your project and the infrastructure. In Hadoop interviews, equal emphasis is given to the use case, infrastructure, and technical aspects of the Hadoop related tools used by you. Tell me about your most recent Hadoop project. This is the first question you will be asked. How you're going to answer this question is going to steer the rest of the interview. We cannot stress this enough. Prepare and practice a very good answer for this question. If you are an experienced Hadoop developer, you're probably thinking, I work in a Hadoop environment day to day in and out. Why do I have to prepare an answer in advance for this question? The honest answer is most people don't give a very good answer to this question and struggle to show the interviewer a big picture on why they are using Hadoop and why Hadoop is solving their big data problems. Don't just say we are using Hadoop because we have to deal with terabytes of data. A well-designed Oracle database can handle terabytes of data very well. Explain a very good use case and walk the interviewer through the use case, showing him the challenges and how you solve them using Hadoop. Give concrete reasoning explaining why it is harder to solve the problem using traditional approach like RDBMS and explain how you solve the problem using Hadoop. When you explain a use case from your project, make sure to point out the tools used and how it was used. You can break down the tools in terms of data ingestion, data analysis, etc. You can expect some follow-up questions regarding your environment, architecture, tool choices, etc. So know a lot about your environment. For example, yarn setup, HA configuration, security setups, etc. When you make an excellent first impression by answering this question correct, the interviewer will be impressed and would like to check out your technical skills. Know about your cluster. Interviewers are very interested to know about your cluster and how it was managed. Make sure you know the number of nodes, data volume, replication factor, block size, number of mappers and reducers per node if the cluster is configured to use MRV1 setup, memory allocated to the mappers and reducers if the cluster is configured to use yarn, and Hadoop distributions used, etc. It is a good idea to prepare for this question in advance. Expect to hear questions from cloud services like AWS and your familiarity with it. A lot of great questions can be asked from HDFS. You most likely will not hear the question, what is HDFS? It is given that you know answer to this question, so start focusing on the important concepts. For example, you could be asked how HDFS is different from other file systems, or why HDFS has a huge block size as compared to a block size of 4 KB as seen in many other traditional file systems. Or what happens when one of the replica nodes fail during a write operation? Here's one more. How does HDFS deals with corruption? And another one, what is data locality, network topology considerations, etc. These are some good questions and they could be asked in a real interview. You can find answers to those questions in the HDFS chapter. Interviewers love MapReduce because it gives them an opportunity to ask a lot of tough questions to validate the candidate's knowledge of Hadoop framework. Why so much emphasis on MapReduce, you ask? Because it is the heart of Hadoop, and this is where the magic happens. Here is a simple question. Explain shuffle phase. We often wonder why 8 out of 10 interviewees struggle to answer this question. Either they don't understand what happens during shuffle or they know it but just can't explain it very well. Either reasons are bad. As simple and obvious as it sounds, start your MapReduce preparation with a clear conceptual understanding of the different phases in MapReduce. By clear conceptual understanding, we mean know inside and out. We often hear candidates who struggle to explain MapReduce phases say something like, I work on Pig and Hive, and so I'm not familiar with the internal workings of MapReduce. Not a good answer and completely unacceptable. Our response would be something like, how can you write an efficient and optimized Pig instructions or Hive queries if you don't understand the phases or what is going on behind the scenes in MapReduce? You get the point, right? Make sure you understand step by step on what happens to the key value pairs that are emitted from mapper and how it gets to its corresponding reducers. There is so much detail in the shuffle process. Shuffle process is where the magic happens in MapReduce, and there are a lot of ways to optimize it. Know about compression with MapReduce, tuning and optimizations to MapReduce, development and debugging process when you write a MapReduce program. So make sure you understand what goes on in map, reduce, shuffle, and combiner phases. Make sure you understand how the output from the mapper are passed to the reducers. There are several classes involved in a MapReduce program, like input format, record reader, output format, etc. Know the functions and details of each of those classes and the role they play in a MapReduce program. Some interviewers would give you a problem and ask you to explain how you would solve the problem using MapReduce. For some developers, visualizing a problem in MapReduce is difficult. Try this simple problem. Explain how would you solve a classic group by SQL operation in MapReduce. To answer this, you have to explain what would be the key and value that would be sent to the mapper and will be outputted from the mapper, and how the key value pairs will end up in its corresponding reducers, and finally, what happens in the reducer. So bottom line, MapReduce is very important. Most of the companies use Pig or Hive or other similar tools for their MapReduce processing in the cluster. Some interviewer will ask you to write Pig Latin instructions or Hive QL queries. So go over the syntax for Pig and Hive. Hive query comes very natural to us because it is SQL based, whereas a little more effort is involved in writing Pig instructions. Pig instructions are very simple and it is just a matter of remembering the syntax, so when you're asked to write, you're able to do so. Pay close attention to instructions that look alike but different in its functions. For example, sort by versus order by in Hive. Hive is rich in its functionalities when compared to Pig. Make sure the key concepts in Hive, like managed table versus external table, partitions, buckets, SERDI, etc. Make sure to understand the key concepts in Hive, like managed table versus external table, partitions, buckets, SERDI, etc. You might get questions to design Hive tables with performance and efficiency in mind. Join is a difficult to implement operation in plain MapReduce, but Pig and Hive make it easier to join dataset. So tools like Pig and Hive are used widely to perform joins. So give more emphasis to join operations in both Pig and Hive. Focus a lot in understanding the optimization techniques and hints that comes with join operations. Make sure to understand how different file formats like sequence file, Avro, etc. can be used with Pig and Hive. A good Hadoop interview is not over until you hear troubleshooting and debugging related questions. Hadoop cluster is a complicated environment and involves a lot of nodes working together, and this means a lot of potential for things to go wrong. And this means as a developer, you should be prepared for it. As a developer, you could be working on plain MapReduce programs or pig instructions or Hive queries on a day-to-day basis. And there are several procedures or steps you can implement to optimize performance with each tool. Here are some of the areas you should go over before an interview. Learn about the shuffle process and learn about the memory settings that affect performance within the shuffle process. Learn about how the number of mappers and reducers might affect performance. Learn about how you can change the memory settings of mappers and reducers and affect the performance in a positive or in a negative way. Learn about compression and places where you can enable compression to optimize the performance. Learn about how you can change the memory settings for mappers and reducers. Learn about how joins in Pig and Hive gets translated into MapReduce programs. Knowing this will help you in optimizing performance and fix failures. Learn about join optimizations in Pig and Hive. Knowing your data is key, and learn about how file formats, structure of data can affect performance. Note, all the topics that I mentioned here just now are covered in the troubleshooting and optimizations chapter. So make sure to go over the chapter before you go for an interview. Next, prepare yourself for architecture-based questions even you're interviewing for a Hadoop developer position. Make sure how your cluster in your current job or the Hadoop clusters that you worked before are protected against single point of failures. Understand the difference between secondary name node, checkpoint, and standby node and their significance of each. Know about high availability setup even when high availability is not configured in your cluster. Make sure you know the differences between the architecture in MRV1 and MRV2. Understand the benefits of yarn when compared to MapReduce architecture in MRV1. The cluster that you worked with before can be maintained in-house or with one of the cloud service providers like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, etc. It is great if you're already using AWS and familiar with it. But if you're not familiar with AWS, it is important that you make yourself familiar with AWS. Go over the cluster setup chapter where we set up a 3-node Hadoop cluster on AWS. Why knowing AWS is important? Not all companies, especially startups, have the financial bandwidth to maintain a cluster in-house. So they take advantage of the cost-effective solutions offered by cloud service providers like Amazon, Microsoft, etc. So make sure to be familiar with AWS services like EBS, EC2, EMR, etc. Throughout this course, we have covered a lot of Hadoop interview questions wherever possible. The Hadoop Developer Interview Guide from BigDataInterviewQuestions.com has over 100 questions from real Hadoop interviews. You should already have a 50% discount code for the guide. Even better, write us a honest review and we will give you the guide for free. In this lesson, we talked about some conventional and not so conventional places where you can look for Hadoop job openings. Next, we talked about some good tips on what we should have on the resume. Finally, we talked about interviews and some actionable tips that you can apply during your interview preparation process. Good luck with the interview process and we wish you all the very best. With that, let's wrap this lesson.